Thank you, Ambassador. Our first panel of the day, I would like to invite Mr. Anish Agrawal.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Idan, for that introduction. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I'd like to add my welcome to you all. Thank you for being here. So far today, we've heard from the leaders of arguably the two most influential and important stakeholders in our industry, the government of Botswana and De Beers. Many of us are sitting here today because of the work that they have done over the last few decades. Their leadership has been absolutely crucial, and it will continue to be. What the rest of us have to do is to build on that leadership, and in many ways that was the biggest takeaway from Al Cook's conversation, which is when we're confronted with industry-wide issues, all of us have to step up and be leaders. The whole supply chain needs to be involved. And the supply chain topic that's probably been discussed the most over the last 18 months is traceability. Now, I know some of you might argue that it's actually been profitability, but hopefully Idan has got you covered later on today. I have full confidence in you, Idan. Traceability is the topic of today's session, this session, and it's probably a good thing that we're having it before lunch because it's quite a dry topic, it's complex, it's prone to getting bogged down in detail. But the reason we're having this session is because it's got the ability to be one of those industry-defining issues. In terms of how we describe diamonds, it's probably the biggest development since the 4 Cs. It'll impact the way each and every one of us does business, and beyond an operating environment, it may well determine how much our diamonds are actually worth. Now, a lot of us, when we think of traceability, think of it in terms of the recent G7 sanctions. But the truth is that traceability has a long history and a wide scope. We've had traceability programs for decades. I need a click. Canada Mark, Forever Mark, Argyle Pinks. These were relatively niche programs. They're about promoting specific diamonds by a particular origin. It's only when lab-grown diamonds came into the picture that traceability and origins became a lot more important. Because lab-grown diamonds are physically and optically the same as natural diamonds, only their method of creation is different. But here's the problem we have. As an industry, we never historically promoted origins as part of our marketing story. It was never part of it. So what that meant was that lab-grown diamonds could come in and take full advantage of all the diamond equity that we'd built up over decades and use it for free. And they had a degree of success with it. The question now is whether origins and traceability-based marketing can reverse some of these trends and build and strengthen the natural diamond industry. And then last year, traceability took on a completely different role, that of evidencing origin as part of the G7 sanctions against Russian diamonds. This was a hotly debated topic. Most of the conversations took place behind closed doors between specific groups of people, and understandably so, because there's a lot of complexity and technicality in what was being discussed. What we want to do today is to widen the audience of that discussion, to broaden the scope of that discussion, and try to answer a number of questions between us. The first one is, what does traceability actually mean? Can we arrive at a common definition between us? The second question is, why do we need traceability? What are the real drivers behind this today? What are the advantages of traceability? Who is driving? Who will benefit from traceability the most? Are there any disadvantages? Are there any unintended consequences to traceability? And finally, how do we practically implement traceability? And here, we're not going to have a technical discussion. It's going to be more around general principles. In a moment, we're going to be inviting up on stage 4 individuals, leaders who've had first-hand experience of the issues to hand. But before we do that, I'd like to probably say at this point that this is everybody's conference. We're going to be keen to get your input. So as Idan mentioned, we are using online polls. If you haven't already, please scan the QR code. It's the exact same one that Idan put on screen, so if you've already done that, it should work. It is with great pleasure that I'd now like to invite up on stage Peter Kovac, who's head of DG Trade at the European Commission. He's been leading the conversations in the diamond industry. Paul Rowley, who's executive vice president of diamond sales at De Beers. Metla Masire, who is the managing director of Okavango Diamond Company, and Jackie Taché, who is the CEO of Group Taché. Thank you and welcome. Thank you very much for being here and volunteering and leading this conversation on traceability. It's quite a complex and technical subject, so we probably need to split it into a few parts. And let's just start with the basics. What is traceability? What does it mean? Peter, if I can ask you that question first, as you spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Before starting my ideas, or to present my ideas, just to say that I'm here with 2 hats. I'm an EU trade policy folk on the one hand, and I had also the pleasure to lead the G7 expert teams on diamonds. So if you want to blame somebody for what is happening, you know, I'm the right person probably. Traceability, what it means? Well, traceability, what is the origin of traceability? Well, traceability has been invented, first of all, because of the complexities, the globalization which is happening in trade. So trade is becoming more global, more complex, and trade is becoming also more regulated. In the past, in the beginning, you only had to take care about the, collecting the customs duties. That was the main issue at the borders. But since then, we had all the security concerns, safety concerns, product safety, environmental regulations, fighting forced labor, combating unfair trade practices, and of course, national security considerations are playing an important role. They have started already from 9/11, when, for instance, in terms of traceability, the first thing I remember that we were insisting on tracing and tracking containers digitally, and that's been happening already for quite some time. Traceability is also of course, technology-based, but it's not a new thing, as Anish already said. For instance, in the EU and more globally, we have an important tracing system, which is called, and 20-year-old system actually, which is called, you will probably anticipate it, Traces. So we have Traces, which is a tracking tracing system for food safety purposes, tracking and tracing live animals, food products, and the like, to ensure actually that we can fight diseases and avoid risks. We have also a traceability initiative, the digital product passport, which is coming in the framework of the eco-design regulation, which is being developed now, which will practically provide for digital identity cards for practically all products which will be in circulation in the European Union. And we also use traceability in implementing other measures like trade defense measures and also sanctions. And perhaps there we can discuss later on how we implement sanctions.
Sure, thanks a lot, Peter, for that understanding of traceability overall. And as this conversation progresses, it will be valuable to hear the experiences of other industries that you've talked about. Paul, can I turn to you? What do you think traceability means for diamonds?
Look, I think Peter made some really important distinctions there. Whether it's diamonds or whether it's anything else, traceability is really around a changing consumer preference at the end of the day. People have become to care. They care about where their products come from. They care about what their products have done on their journey. What's the impact, the social impact? How has it improved people's lives? But I think most importantly is that it hasn't damaged anything on its way. It hasn't hurt anyone on its way. And that's the real change. And when it comes to diamonds, we've had a journey of a lot of talk around technology, I guess, but technology is really the enabler. And the last few years have been making sure that we can have a technology that gives confidence in traceability. But ultimately, it's an enabler. Sure. And what's really important is what's happening, if you like, down the pipeline. What's happening to the consumer preference, and how do we enable the journey of a diamond, in this case, to ensure that it's traveled a path that's made a difference.
Sure.
And we can tell that story, and the reason we want to tell it is because people care at the end of the day, and that's the important difference.
I think this is a really important topic. What we want to do is, as this conversation progresses, talk about technology as enabler and about the value of origins. At this moment, what we want to do is focus the conversation a little bit on practically and technically, what does traceability mean? There's a lot of discussion about traceability. Metla, can I turn to you from a producer country perspective? Why would you want traceability? What does traceability mean practically?
Thank you. For me, traceability is not new. But I think what is now becoming evident is the need to have a transparent and the ability to see from source to market. So we've always known where the origins of the diamonds come from. But what has been difficult is for the end user to accurately be able with confidence to say for sure the diamond they're holding come from a particular country. And for us, Botswana, it is very important because as a producer country, we would like our customers and the end user to be well aware of where the diamond comes from, so that as we tell the story of what it has done to the producer country, and in our case, Botswana, we know what the diamonds have done, the end user or the consumer buys the diamond with the full confidence that the diamond they're holding is indeed coming. And this is where the value of traceability comes in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Metla. Going back to you, Peter, what did you expect practically in your role from traceability? Were you looking for a technology solution? Were you looking for something else? It's obviously been an area you've been involved in.
From our perspective, as a trade policy perspective, for us, the most important is that to find solutions for the most efficient implementation of our legislation. If we can solve it through technology, then of course we must use technology. And I was extremely happy to hear Mr. Cook in his presentation to say that technology is there. And technology is available, so I think that's very important. And this is what we see also again for other products. There are more complex products than diamonds. We are dealing with batteries. We are dealing with electric vehicles. We are dealing with other complex products where we are following and pursuing this path to develop traceability. Those will be probably more complex, but anything which can help, anything which provides the greatest certainty possible for us from the policy perspective is a good solution.
Thanks a lot. You talked about technology there, Peter. Paul, coming to you for a moment. There are a number of different technologies to try to build you talk about technology as being and traceability as being an enabler, but a lot of different enabling technologies. Is that a problem that there are all these different types of technology? Does it cause confusion?
It comes down to trust and transparency. So speaking from a diverse perspective, obviously we've been developing Tracer now since 2017. It's not an easy thing to do on scale. And what Al was referencing in his speech is absolutely right. We've got to a point now where certainly from the beginning of next year, half a carat gem goods and above, certified goods, certainly will be able to trace on scale back to country of origin, which is it's a great achievement, and congratulations to Wes and the team and everyone else. But ultimately, that's rough to rough, and it's very important that that's not just about what consumers, whether they're in the G7 or anywhere else in the world, tend to buy polished as being their predominant purchases. So it's obviously how we collaborate amongst that technology as well. And we spoke a lot about collaborations, how things change, partnerships. These are the things of the future. The people in this room are all interacting in their own way, and we each have a responsibility to make sure that traceability, if a consumer is asking for it, and we firmly believe it is, we don't see it as a regulatory driver. Tracer was on the cars way before the G7 sanctions, for example. So we see the driver of traceability as being what's the right thing to do because the consumer wants it into the future.
Sure.
That will require collaborations. That will require being able to do things on scale, because otherwise all we're going to do is create a cost to the industry.
Yep.
And as we know, you opened up with one of the main drivers is also profitability. So we've got to make sure that this is adding value, telling the right stories. And you heard Al talk about premiums. That's where we see things into the future because you can differentiate product. The technology is there. It's a great enabler, but it will require collaborations to ensure that we see rough all the way through to the polish, not just rough to rough.
Sure, thanks. Jackie, I want to bring you in at this point because you use some of these traceability systems. Practically, how do you understand traceability? Before we talk about the demand side, at a technical level, how do you see traceability and what's being required at the moment?
I think first we have to make a distinction between traceability and third-party systems that are verifying the traceability. We've been doing traceability for years with our customers, and it's based on our CRP systems, and we can trace our diamonds. Now, when we bring in third-party solutions, the technology solutions that we bring in, there may come a complexity. Because I think people don't realize we're always talking about larger stones, center stone, 50 pointers and above. That's easy to understand. But the smaller you go into the size of the stone, the bigger, the complexer the system becomes to verify the traceability. And I think we may talk about it later, but we have to realize it's only half a solution to trace the stones, the 50 pointers and above. What about all the smaller stones? And there we have a long way to go to find a standardization for the industry that people can trace their goods and have a third-party verification, which is cost efficient. That's going to be very tricky.
No, thanks a lot, Jackie. And that brings in quite a lot of different points there. I just want to pause for a moment here because one question, and Peter helpfully took responsibility here, that if there are any problems, blame him, which I think is very helpful for the rest of us. Peter, what will happen to traceability if the G7 sanctions go away? What if the US unilaterally drops out of these sanctions?
Well, as a technician, as I would qualify myself, and we don't. Well, of course, sometimes we work also on the basis of what if, but for the time being, we don't see the sanctions going away. Definitely not in the EU, and I think that also it will be the same in G7 countries. Of course, what will happen in some G7 countries in the future, there are many question marks. So I wouldn't like to try to anticipate what will happen in certain countries. But for the time being, I do not see that our sanctions would be weakened. Actually, the direction is the contrary. So we are actually planning new sanctions against Russia.
We're just kind of trying to think about this. If it were not, Peter, for the G7 sanctions, do you think that traceability, from a regulatory point of view, is actually here to stay regardless of sanctions? Could it be used in other kind of trade measures that countries might take?
Yes, by all means. I mentioned already that we have this digital product passport initiative in the framework of the eco-design regulation. So in fact, this will become a practice in the EU, and we believe that it will be also a practice in more globally. That, but given that products became so complex and trade has become so globalized that otherwise it's very difficult to follow the product. So we need traceability. We need to, and we have this. We had already for a long time this idea of or term of end-to-end supply chain, and this is what we have to follow. And now we have the technology to do so really, and not only to talk about it.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. Both Paul and Metler have talked a little bit about traceability and consumers wanting it and so on. Before we get to the consumer part, because that's going to be a critical part of this discussion, your business, Taché Group, sells to a lot of retailers, brands, non-brands, across different countries as well, different market positionings. What does traceability offer as an added value to your customers that you sell to?
First of all, you have to understand that all our customers, the luxury brands, have embarked into a transparency of their supply chain for all their products. Okay, they can trace every leather to a single cow, and diamond should not be an exception. So it's today part of their policy, part of their business. They cannot work anymore without being able to tell to the consumer where every product of every part of the product, are being coming from. In this regard, I don't think G7 going away is going to have traceability go away completely. Traceability will stay. The question is, again, how we monitor the traceability, what systems are being put in place to verify the traceability, but traceability is there to stay for the long run, for sure.
I think traceability, let's go back from that perspective. Let's start with the Kimberley process. So it's been around for a long time, yes? So it's not that it's just suddenly appeared from nowhere. We've responded to market challenges or the industry challenges in many different ways over the years, and as if we just take the KP alone, it evolves over that period of time. More recently, we now move from country of origin to listed countries. We move to digitization. This is progression that we see that's there way before any sanctions as such that we're talking today. So traceability is something that we've always believed is important. Differentiation is important. So I think it's how we develop it into the future. I think the regulatory and sanction side of things, Peter, is something that's in the moment, and we should be looking at how that operates. But I think this is more around what is traceability really all about, and what's the real need for it. And I think the industry has responded to the various challenges through the years to develop relevant traceability options. And of course, as technology improves, then so will traceability improve with it.
No, thanks a lot, Paul. One of the problems we're having at the moment is around not the technical issues around traceability, but the technical issues around the screen behind us. So at this point, we were actually going to be talking a little bit about getting audience interaction. Hopefully this comes back online because there are some interesting polls we wanted your opinion on. So forgive us, we're working on it. Let's just quickly pick up on one thing that has been said so far, just in terms of cost. Before we go on to storytelling, which will be the next topic, Jackie and Metler, starting with you, Jackie, how expensive practically is traceability to implement for your business?
It's gradually more expensive the lower you go into the size of the stone. Of course, everybody can understand that a very large stone is very easy to trace from the mine through the manufacturing process down to the finger. That's very easy. So the smaller it goes, the more it becomes complex. And the complexity adds cost, of course, and depends what the customer wants. Just to give an example, if the customer wants to have its small diamonds traced to the mine, you can imagine the amount of parcel papers we have to have in order to keep all the mines separately. So that increases exponentially the cost logistically, and it's becoming, but it's a cost of doing business. For brands, this is something you have to do, and it's part of the price. The problem is going to become, I think, when if we're talking about regulation, if we go into regulation indiscriminately of tracing all the goods, what happens with the goods that are lower end is going to be the cost sustainable to be sold into regulated countries as opposed to be sold into unregulated countries. Because the lower we go into the price of the goods, PK goods, Cape goods, the more the cost is going to be an important part of the traceability, and the more it's going to have an impact on the sustainability of selling those goods into the regulated countries.
No, thanks a lot. And Mettler, can I ask you as well, from a producer perspective, how do you see the costs of traceability? Are they something that you've just got to pay for? And who should pay for the traceability as well if you're going to implement it?
Yes, I think it's a cost that is becoming part of the business. So if we run the business, we all want traceability for different reasons. So if we want it, we must pay for it. I think the key question always comes to who should pay. And I think it's not a simple answer. It depends on many factors. Like I say, whether it's imposed regulatory or whether it is a request that is put on you as a supplier, that may influence who pays for the cost, but somebody is going to pay along the way. But to me, it's not even important who pays. It is the impact of the cost on the industry. What I mean by that is if the costs become excessive, they start to threaten the industry because other alternatives come into play. So it is important that we try and retain the cost to a minimum, but not to pretend that there are no costs associated.
No, thanks a lot, Mettler. Peter, just to bring you in for a moment, then we're going to talk about storytelling. Have you seen problems with implementing traceability in other industries that we should be aware of in our industry? Challenges or traps that we need to avoid?
There are always challenges, and of course, industry is never happy when new requirements are introduced. So that's, let's face it. I haven't met any industry representatives who would have said, that wow, it's a new regulation, and we are so happy actually that we have to provide this and that. No, it doesn't happen. What is important and what we are trying to do, and I believe that we have been doing in the diamond industry, and with the diamond industry and also with other industries, is regular discussions, consultations, involving them in the process to identify already in the very beginning of the process what can be the issues, what can be the problems, and the challenges, and how to solve them. And this is what we have been trying to do. Certainly, there are always challenges because these are new requirements, and the industries have to adapt, and it's additional administrative costs. Many of them are in crisis or difficult economic situations, but in long term, I'm convinced that they will be better off with the implementation. And definitely our consumers will be better off if we properly implement our regulations.
It looks like we've got the screen back. I hope that means we can run our first poll. I would just like to jump straight in. We can. I'd like to just jump straight in, and everybody, if you can turn to your phone, we're going to ask the first question. And this is to get your pulse in the audience. We do need your feedback, so please do engage with this. What we want to know is what statement best describes your current position, so today's position, with respect to traceability. Now, I've got to say, this is anonymous, I've been promised. So you are free to answer whatever you wish. You think that traceability is an opportunity to improve your business prospects. You are adopting some traceability measures, the second option, but only where they're necessary to continue your business. You're taking a wait-and-see approach, but you haven't made any real business changes to your practices yet. And finally, that you're not going to be implementing any traceability measures. It's either too expensive, it's not worth it, or you think it's damaging to your business. What we're seeing is an overwhelming move towards seeing traceability as an opportunity, which is fantastic. So either you thought that or Paul has done a great job. Let's talk a little bit about why traceability is so positive. So we've talked a lot about traceability as an enabler. At the end of the day, traceability is a technology. It's what it allows that is the key thing that we're trying to get out of this. Mettler, are you taking any steps to develop a Botswana Origins program? Do you see it as a way of adding value? If so, why?
I think from Botswana's point of view, I mean, as our president earlier said, he made it very clear what diamonds mean for the country. So we've always, since the days when KP started, Botswana has advocated the need to be able to confirm where your diamond comes from. And traceability just becomes a vehicle now that helps us to assure the customers where the diamond comes from. When you look at what Botswana has to share in terms of what the diamonds have done to the country, whether they're talking about free healthcare, free education, the infrastructure from being the poorest country in independence to where we are today. All these things can only be verified and confirmed to the end user through a tool like traceability. So this is why, from a Botswana point of view, it is key and it is essential that the program, so that we can drive our provenance program through the traceability aspect.
Thank you, Mettler. Paul, you've already commented on the fact that you're doing a lot of work on origins. It's something that you see consumers need from your research. It's something that's being a demand pull. Is there anything else you want to say about why you're doing the origins program at this stage?
I don't think I could say anything more than Mettler, to be quite honest. I think he's explained the story incredibly well. What I would share is I remember, it was actually a few years ago, because obviously we have an aggregated business model, so it's taken us a while to be able to scale up to then be able to give country of origin backwards. And a certain retailer at the time asked me about country of origin, and I asked him if anyone was asking for it. It's very interesting for me. He said, it's not about today, it's about the future. In the future, people will demand to know where their products come from. And that's what this is about. It's about looking forward and making sure we can do it. The question about what we say will be down to, and I think it's interesting that not everyone, it's about 80% for traceability, I guess, and there's other parts of it. 60, the all-in is an interesting dynamic because probably quite difficult to be all-in. But people will find their ability to do this. That's why I think even, as I said, it's a community coming together of the diamond industry that will find the right journey to traceability, pulled by the consumer, assisted by, and I guess implemented and governed by regulation. And I think what's been very good about the G7 is the fact that actually they did come to the industry, and we have had lots of discussions, and we found a balance of coming through it that balances the two together. To Jackie's point of cost. Yeah, no one's here to, everyone's realized that you can't just do a blanket of anything, to be quite honest, because it can be very dangerous. But it's about ensuring that the journey meets the end needs, but understands what we need to do to get there. And that's a really important part of it for me. And then that allows us to tell these stories that the consumer, if they don't want it today, very much will want in the future.
Peter, are there any success stories from other industries where people have used traceability, which started off as a regulatory practice, but became a marketing advantage? And no problem if the answer is no. We are pioneers in diamonds.
Whether it is, well, certainly, again, if we are coming back to traces, which is the food safety traceability system, there actually you can only participate in the EU market. You can only enter in the EU market if you actually are part of the system. So there is an obligation. So in a way, this is of course a market advantage because otherwise you don't have access to the market. But for me, what is really important, of course, it's benefits for the industry, but at the end of the day, benefits for the consumer.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Jackie, I'm going to come to you now and deep dive. Let's understand what customers are asking for and why, in practical terms. But let's bring another poll in so we have everybody's viewpoint. Sorry, these are a little bit in a different order to I would have probably have done them. Let's try this one. So what we want to know is many people here are in the midstream. These are people who are traders and manufacturers of diamonds who sell to retailers and other customers. What we want to ask you is what proportion of your customers, and this is today, what proportion of your customers today ask you about traceability and origin? Again, this number of customers, just practically today, how many of your customers ask about where your diamonds come from? Sorry, I think this is actually the wrong. Has it gone to the right one? Are we having problems again? Hang on a second. My sincere apologies. This is not what we were trying to poll. Can someone help me with the polling, please, to go back to the second one? It's working? Then it's me. Let's try that again.
That's why it's so important that the technical solution can do what it says.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we get very confused.
I keep pressing the buttons, but nothing is happening. Okay, let's pause that for a moment. Jackie, can I quickly ask you, what proportion of your customers today actually ask you about traceability?
It's very simple. All our luxury brand clients are asking for traceability, and that's for years. It hasn't started with the Russian-Ukraine war. It started years ago, and it's in their policy to have to trace their goods in a transparent way. So all of them. To be honest, beyond luxury brands and maybe just the very near retailers or high-end retailers, there's very few people for the moment that are asking for traceability. Now and then, they are asking whether we know the origin, whether we can give them, but not in a structured way, the same way luxury brand clients are asking to do so. And it's for different reasons. I mean, luxury brands, they need to protect their names. It's very evident that if their supply chain is not fully transparent, the first hit, they are taking the first hit. If there is anything wrong in their supply chain, it's their name that is taking their hit. So they cannot afford to have any untransparent supply chain.
And do you see that as a risk mitigation part for retailers predominantly?
So I think we have several factors. First of all, yes, you can call it risk mitigation. They need to be able to answer. And I've talked to a few retailers, and they've said some clients are asking where the stones are coming from. And it's important they are able to respond. They are not asking for the moment, are they coming from Botswana, South Africa, Namibia, or somewhere else. But they're asking whether they know it's coming from. Now, there is a trend, of course, to develop specific collections around a specific origin. Now, it's important that we understand that it can only happen in a very contained way. Then it's marketable. What is not marketable today for luxury brands is to be able to market the fact that every stone comes from a different origin, because it opens a Pandora box. By the mere fact that it's going to be impossible to explain why or if a Botswana diamond is better than a Namibian diamond, Angolan diamond, whatever. They don't want to be confronted with that kind of risk. So what we've seen is that we have some programs that are developed for either a line of jewelry or one big piece of jewelry for one origin only, and that's marketable. So they are using and for risk mitigation and for some marketing for very specific areas.
So, I mean, I think that's really interesting. And how much, because going into this conversation, you did quite a lot of consumer research as well. Going into this, do you see any retailers telling the origin story at consumer level today?
I don't think today they are ready to, if I'm talking at the level of luxury brands, I don't think they're ready to associate their name with a particular country or countries or mine, because their name is what they have. It's the strongest asset they have. And if there is anything that can go wrong in a mine or a country, they don't want to take that risk. So I don't see any luxury retailer willing to associate their name with a specific country. In general, they need to know where the stones are coming from, but to promote and again, except if it's very specific on a specific line, and that happens, and it will happen more and more.
One of the things, Paul, that De Beers, you talked about aggregation and you talked about splitting out things from country of origin. Can I just quickly check? You are working towards country of origin as part of your offering. Are you going to be clear about each diamond that you sell in rough, which country it's come from? What level, I guess, will that traceability come at?
Yeah, look, as I said, I think, in fact, we announced this a while ago. Since September, we've been giving country of origin on tracer from what we call 5 grainers rough and above. That'll give you roughly around certainly 1 carat and above. And as we move to this next phase of 4 grainers, 1 carat rough, you're going to get, you'll cover half a carat polish across the De Beers group of companies' productions that will have country of origin to it on tracer. So that's the next phase. But I also want to just build on what Jackie was saying about the brands. I think what we have to, it comes back to the what about tracer, and I come back, it's the care. As we start to move towards climate change, ESG, brands are what they're looking for. When we look at the commitments of Paris 26, when we look at where we'll have to monitor where the products come, the carbon neutrality of it, all of these are things that will come into the future. That's all about storytelling of the journey. The great things that Metal is talking about, what it's done, but it's the how. It's what the president and Al spoke about, ethical mining, doing the right things, carbon neutrality, managing that carbon into the future. These are all things that are going to be so important. And in the very near term, 2026 isn't a long way away.
Sure.
As we start to measure these changes in the carbon. So, as I said, I think it's ensuring we can monitor to what level.
And from your origins perspective, I mean, it's good to understand the diamonds do good at a general level. Will you also be promoting origin stories based on country of origin? So this is what a Botswana diamond says, this is what a Namibian diamond says, and so on.
Very potentially, as we heard earlier, we've got marketing committees that we're working closely with in Botswana. Likewise, we're doing it elsewhere. We've had the Shining Light Awards, had various things out of South Africa in the past. You had them up there with the Canadian diamond options. We will look at what's appropriate and how that operates and promoting out. But at the same time, as we said, the important thing is the category at the moment. So it's a mixture. There's not a one-size-fits-all. It's about matching the market demand to what's going to drive a category as well. And so it's a combination of marketing efforts going into the future. That's what we're looking at. And working with partners and expanding. What we heard about today was the retail collaborations, the upcountry collaborations. We need to explore how those go much further into the future.
Metla, you've talked a lot about Botswana diamonds so far on the panel. What do you think are the unique selling points of Botswana diamonds in particular?
First of all, I want to agree with Paul that it is important that the consumer at the end of the day wants a natural diamond. So what is most important is to market a natural diamond and make sure that it is the preferred choice when you come to diamonds. Only then can you start talking about the countries and where it comes from. I think, like I say, Botswana's case in a way is very simple because evidence is there. You can see the results of what happens. It is to build that confidence that the end user, and yes, maybe right now the consumer may not be really interested in that story. But I think, again, what Paul talked about, ESG, it becoming a license to operate for the retailers. The retailers need to give the assurance that they can attract and can say with, especially when they start coming to carbon neutrality and things like that, they need to be able to say it with full confidence. And I think this is where we come in terms of the ethical nature and in terms of the commitments that have been done by our suppliers in Botswana, in terms of where they're going, in terms of carbon neutrality. These are some of the stories that will be coming out. So people are looking for different things. Some may be looking for carbon neutrality. Some may be looking for ethical mining. Some may look at the development that the diamonds have done to the country. These are all important stories that you can package and make them offerings to those who want them.
I guess the question is, though, that we could live in a world, if we're doing origins-based marketing, and I think this is the kind of key point for me, is there a world where some origins are just worth more than others? Right? I mean, we do see this in other industries, and we move away from diamonds being a catch-all thing and a product category, and it splits into different origins being worth slightly different things. And Jackie, I mean, just to ask you practically today, would you consider paying more for diamonds from a certain origin? And would that be based on retailer demand?
So I agree with what was said. I mean, it will develop more and more into those practical items. It's very important that a consumer know the carbon neutrality of the mine, etc. If you ask me whether I would today pay more for certain origin, no, because for the moment the consumer is not paying more for an origin. Is it going to happen? It will really depend on whether there is the ability for, especially the leading groups in this industry, to want to push themselves forwards associated with a country. It may happen. I don't think they're ready for it now. But depending on how the industry organizes itself, it may happen, and then you will have some differences. But I think people are very scared today. I mean, retailers are very scared today to have to explain why that diamond is worth more than this diamond, and it's still a long way before we get there. But we have to pave the way.
So I mean, we could live in a world in the future where, when you're speaking to a consumer about a diamond that you want to buy, you're talking about the 4 Cs, you're talking about various aspects of it, and you're trying to, as a salesperson and a retailer, sell why one origin is particularly compelling. And then what do you do with previous diamonds that have, where you don't know what the origin is going to be? Are they going to be worth less? So there are kind of issues with that. And Paul, in your work at De Beers, I'm sure you would have foreseen that possibility. What would you say? What do you think of that scenario where some countries' origins are actually more valuable than others? And how would that affect the De Beers business?
Look, I think I don't think it's just origins. It's what origin and country of origin means.
Sure.
So invariably, it's around what is the definition of that. And I come back. It's how we market what's happened within those countries that supports an origin story. And it'd be like anything else. It's like, brands different. The very same stone is bought at one price in one brand compared to what it's bought at an wholesale price somewhere else. So it comes part and parcel, I think, to what Jackie's saying is what the consumer wants and how it's marketed and affordability at the end of the day. So it's a mixture of those points. I think what's important is to be able to understand, where does my diamond come from? And then the consumer will make a choice. Brands themselves are looking to understand that no one can walk in and claim that they don't know where their products come from. They'll have to monitor that into the future. But will they differentiate? We're not writing the future here today. We will see what the consumer wants and how we pivot our way through that. But I think there are definitely opportunities. But in the short term, the big part of it is natural diamonds, and we need to make sure that we're emphasizing and promoting natural diamonds. I said that's a category marketing approach that we heard of today. And with that will come a real responsibility that those diamonds come with the right stories and very much the backstory of where they've come and what they've done on their route. But I think when we look at countries and individuals, that's to be seen, to be quite honest. I think as we go forward, the consumer will decide.
Have you got any insights, Peter, thank you, Paul, on how this has played out in other industries? Have you seen other industries where some origins of the same product have been worth more than others?
Of the same origins?
No, different origins,
Different origins.
Same product.
Yes, I think it happens in many industries where some production, some countries have higher reputation. You can close to your industries. I mean, if you look at watchmaking, or if you look at cars, or you can look even at food products. And then if you involve, I don't know, geographical indications, for instance. So there are many examples which I could bring up where origin brings the added value, at quite significant added value. Now, of course, the complexities that we are talking about, when we talk about origin, like from a trade policy or customs policy sense, that is different from where the diamonds are mined or coming from, because when you have a jewelry, a diamond ring, there the official origin will not be most probably the origin of the diamond, like from the mine. And therefore, I think that it is very important to have this story about the jewelry and all other goods which include diamonds. And just if I may, just one personal comment, before coming here, I checked on the internet, buying diamonds for dummies, and one of the first advice which they give, ask for a certificate. Ask for a certificate and look. Okay, it's mainly for the grading report, but still, it's not that I'm buying diamonds every day, but if I buy a diamond, I would like to know personally where it is coming from.
What did you foresee as part of this? And just don't know is an option, I guess, to this. But did you foresee a scenario where Russian diamonds would be worth less than diamonds from other origin when you were putting together the G7 sanctions?
Well, frankly, this is one of the objectives of our sanctions, where we want to exclude them from the G7 market, and then it means that hopefully they will generate less revenue from the diamonds. So this is one of the objectives, to reduce the revenue of Russia from diamonds. So we are hoping. Of course, we cannot force or impose our sanctions on others. So we cannot force other countries to implement our sanctions. But we are hoping that, especially given the force and the size of the G7 retail market, that it will play an important role.
One of the things that both Paul and Mettler, you have been talking about, is the importance of promoting natural diamonds. Now, I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but Origins programs came into prominence around the time when lab-grown diamonds started taking a degree of market share. What we're saying in terms of market share is that there is some research that suggests that consumers bought lab-grown diamonds instead of natural diamonds. We're at a situation where we saw almost 1 in 2 engagement rings in the US has a lab-grown center stone. We're seeing a flood of cheaper lab-grown polish. Now, we have got no problems with people buying lab-grown diamonds. The challenge is if they buy lab-grown diamonds instead of natural diamonds and reduce the overall cake we have as an industry. Paul, were the LGD elements, of course, it's about making natural diamonds more compelling overall, but specifically around lab-grown diamonds, did LGDs play into your origin story for natural diamonds?
No, look, I think we started our Origins thought process and Tracer ahead of that, so it wasn't specifically for that purpose. It was really around understanding and differentiating De Beers diamonds in its entirety of know where your diamonds come from, and let's tell the stories that they've created on the way. Wasn't aimed at LGDs. It's aimed at the product itself, and I'm a big believer that promoting natural is actually the way forward. Natural and lab-grown will coexist in their own fashion. They've gone through a journey, and people will buy and have a choice to buy certain products. But what we've seen in the last 18 months or so is a huge rapid increase in the production of lab-grown, which is, like any technological product, will get to that point. And so I think we see that differentiation. It's not the first time we've seen this sort of disruption, whether it was bizarrely CZ or moissanite. They've all had their different points of coming in order to try and disrupt and find that actually, at the end of the day, a natural diamond is what it is. Yeah, it's a very unique proposition, and that's what we need to understand, market, and make sure. As Al was trying to put across earlier, that we may have taken our eye off the ball in the last decade of concentrating on other things and not focused enough on the actual category and generic marketing as an industry, including De Beers. But as we go forward, I think it's so important to make sure that we understand the properties of natural diamonds, we understand the origins of natural diamonds, and we promote them for what they are. A great investment of something that's unique, that has a very important message. It's really not told by anything else.
Sure.
So I think that's how we should look at it, as opposed to comparing against each other all the time. I don't think is the right thing. They have different value propositions, in my opinion, into the future, and they can coexist very well together.
I mean, I think, look, everybody in the room here knows the great work that natural diamonds do throughout the whole supply chain, the great work it does in terms of creating employment, prosperity, success of producer countries, the huge impact it has in India, and then as it flows through the centers, enriching lives along the way. Jackie, a question for you. Compelling this story is for us, being in the trade, do you think this is just too complicated, a consumer narrative at retail? Let's say compared to a natural, as some lab-grown diamonds fairly or unfairly have been saying, this is a made in America product, made by Americans, for Americans, using wind power, for example, or other renewable energy. Do you think up against that, our story is just too complicated?
I think what is complicated is defend one country against another. It's not complicated to defend the origin in itself. And so you have to have the origin and being able to link it possibly to the mine. So, and therefore I jump to what Paul was saying in terms of carbon emissions, scope 3 and things like this. So that story is not difficult to defend. Where it becomes a bit more complex is if you have to have in your store all type of different origins and being able to tell the difference between a diamond coming from this part or that part. So the solution is either you have a store that sells only diamonds from one origin or collection from one origin, and then it's marketable. If it's not packaged separately, I think it's a tough sales argument for the salesperson in the store to be able to differentiate why this diamond from Botswana is actually different from this diamond from elsewhere.
Okay, no, thanks a lot for that. And I think we are moving into quite a complex area here. You could have multi-origin marketing in the future. You've got the lab-grown natural stories as well. Obviously, priority one is to promote natural diamonds overall as a category. Exactly. But then within that, you've got origin-based marketing. We have seen, and maybe the example that springs to mind for me, is that Argyle pink diamonds are worth more than non-Argyle pink diamonds. And that's an origins-based marketing strategy that has had a degree of success. As we draw this panel to a close, and we enter the last 5-7 minutes, thought it'd be worth looking into the future. Now, you're not going to be asked to make too many predictions, but we're going to start with the man on my left here, Peter. We are still young in the journey on traceability and origin. We have a long history, as Paul has said, as Metla said, as we said at the beginning. We've had traceability programs or origin programs in one way or another for a very long time. Yet there's an overwhelming feeling that we're still young in this journey. Okay, so I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to give a 10-year prediction. Peter, you're in the least favorable position because you have to do it first. So what do you expect from a regulatory perspective, your position on traceability? Do you think it will become tighter, all things being equal? Do you think it will be status quo? Do you think you want to cover the whole range of diamonds, whether they're small, low value? How do you see this developing?
What I see in the evolving regulatory environment, at least in the EU, in 10 years I see basically a full coverage of products in terms of trade. And without being a technology expert, my prediction is that technology will develop in a way that it will enable us to actually do it without unnecessary burden for industries and for administration. So I see a huge development in terms of traceability.
Thank you. Metla, what are your predictions? Where do you see this going in the next 10 years?
I think traceability will become a standard, and you will not be able to operate in the industry if you do not offer that program. I think it will be key to allow the consumer. We've been talking about one diamond being more valuable because it's from another country. I don't actually see it like that. And they may even be priced the same, but the consumer prefers, because the consumer has reasons for that preference. So it's to give the consumer the confidence, or the consumer will be able to go into a shop and find 5 countries put there, diamonds of the same price, but they will prefer one from a particular country. So I think this is why I'm trying to avoid the point where we are debating as to which diamond is more valuable than another, but to ensure that the programs that allow that to happen. I think it will just be a standard of the industry, and we will all be familiar with it. We will have addressed all the challenges, and there'll be collaborations, there'll be global standards in terms of regulation and standards for traceability.
Paul?
I think it's such a dangerous thing to ask someone to look 10 years. If I look back 10 years and you ask me if I expected to be where we are today, it's a very different world. So it's a dangerous sort of forecast with no crystal balls. But let's be clear, from a De Beers perspective, we started in 2017, so 7 years ago, with Tracer, investing tens of millions of dollars in creating a technology solution that would ensure that you could trace your diamonds into the future. So I would suggest that we're very much around the fact that we believe Tracer is here to stay. And I think we've made great strides in that. And I think, to Metla's point, it's going to be a requirement. It's how we get there and what we utilize it for, though, that will be the exciting opportunity. Tracer's not so much a cost, it's what we utilize the platform for to make some exciting futures for ourselves.
And we can all see the value of traceability. Jackie, for you, given you work with a lot of retailers and you work in the trade, are there any unintended consequences that we have not thought of so far, that we are maybe blind to? Would you give any predictions?
Predictions I won't be able to give. I'm going to give a wish that the industry will find a way to standardize all traceability systems and third-party verification systems, because this is the crux of the problem today. And we have some solutions, some competitive solutions, and the problem is that because of all the variety of solutions, including the in-house solution of various diamantes, there is a lot of confusion on the market. So my wish is that, first and foremost, I believe it's going to be a must to do business in the natural diamond in 10 years. Everybody will have to trace their diamonds. My wish is that we find solutions from small goods, because if we don't find a solution from 50 pointers down to 200, 300 per carats, what have we achieved towards the consumer? Are we going to be able to say to the consumer, well, that 50 pointer, we know where it comes from, but that melee, well, it's going to be complicated. We know, but we can't prove it. So the real target here is to find a common ground on how we're going to trace all the diamonds, and then we're going to we will have achieved something for the natural diamond industry.
Thank you, Jackie. Now, just before we started this panel, we heard from Her Excellency, the ambassador from Namibia, talking a little bit about the G7 sanctions. And one elephant in the room we've not talked about are the sanctions themselves. So perhaps as we close up this panel, Peter, can you maybe explain to all of us in the room, where do we stand with the G7 sanctions? Do you have any updates you'd like to give us, and how you expect things to evolve, not in the next 10 years, but in the coming months?
Well, I think that I'm hoping that the audience is well informed on the sanctions. So we have been working very closely together with our G7 partners to develop the sanctions and coordinated our actions. Actually, we are coordinating our actions and sanction work with other G7 countries, not only on diamonds but on the whole scope. And there is a very good cooperation ongoing on that. So where we are now, we took the different steps in terms of restricting the imports of Russian diamonds into our territories. So now we are at the 0.5 threshold. Below that, it's still allowed to import, and the work is ongoing to start. Well, actually, the work is ongoing already on the traceability system and the certification system in Antwerp to be fully functional as of 1st of March. In addition, we are working together. Well, His Excellency, President Boko mentioned already, and others also the ongoing work with Botswana on the certification node, which we are working on. In addition, we are also in discussion with Namibia. We also had preliminary discussions with Angola on the way forward. So the team is working, continuing to work to find the best solutions to satisfy the interests of our partners, those who cooperate with us. And just to say that, of course, all the messages which we received as G7, all those messages were very well received and very well noted, and we will take them into account.
I'd like to give our panelists a huge round of applause. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank all of you in the audience for engaging. Sorry we could not get Slido working properly. That might have been user error on my part. But leaving that to one side, thank you for your patience. I would now like to suggest that I hand back to Idan and that we move on to the next segment for today. Thank you very much.